Well, good afternoon. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here today. Just a quick shout out to Sarah and the group organizers. Just a fantastic day of events. I've really enjoyed the different sessions as well as all the dialogue in between the sessions. So here's the historical perspective I wanted to share with you today to set up what I wanted to talk about. The first is just that over the last 60 years, there's only been 2 times where technology has changed in such a way that it changed businesses and allowed businesses to learn on an exponential curve. The first time was Moore's Law. I think we all know Moore's Law. The processing was doubling every 18 months, and it allowed us to put compute everywhere.
Pas le robot ou l'intelligence.
Sorry about that. And it allowed us to put compute everywhere. The second was Metcalfe's law. Without going into the finer points of the formula, it basically said the value of the network is equal to the square of the nodes. And that gave rise to the platform companies, think Google. But it doesn't stop there. When we look ahead, and there's no doubt that these 2 laws had a profound impact on business and society, there's much more to do. And to that point, there's 3 areas I'd like to cover today. The first is we're entering one of these new special moments, a moment of exponential learning. Secondly, I'd like to share with you some perspective around AI, and most importantly, how we've seen AI be applied to business as well as for social good. And then lastly, I've spent a lot of time the last several years meeting with hundreds of customers talking about implementing AI and Watson and other technologies, other exponential technologies. And I'd like to share with you some lessons learned as we go through that. I mean, there's so much promise, but there's also a lot of learnings along the way. So before I go any further, I wanted to start with a brief video. It's a video of the CEO of Crédit Mutuel. We've had the benefit of working with Crédit Mutuel over the last 3 years with their CEO and the executive team, helping them roll out Watson and AI. As you probably know, they're one of the largest banks in France, over 12 million customers. They have over 5,000 branches, 20,000 employees, and they've been using AI across all their key businesses and rolling it out across all their key functions. And the video is basically focused on 2 things. One is, as you'd appreciate, you've heard it throughout the day, and we'll hear it tomorrow, but what is AI and this man versus machine or man and machine debate. And then separately, he talks about different ways that Crédit Mutuel are using AI to help with their business performance and to grow top-line revenue. One is around what he's calling an email analyzer, and the second is around a virtual agent.
Pas le robot ou l'intelligence artificielle qui va tuer l'emploi et remplacer les employés, pas du tout. C'est au contraire mettre auprès de chacun d'eux un stagiaire, un ordinateur littéraire, parce que qu'est-ce que fait Watson? C'est un ordinateur littéraire. Il comprend le langage.
Exemple, il faut être concret.
Eh bien, je vais vous envoyer un email et Watson, au lieu de repérer des mots-clés, va repérer des phrases qui permettront au logiciel de déterminer l'intention et le degré d'urgence de votre message.
Donc, il classifie et il va aussi peut-être faire une pré-réponse.
Non, il va classifier,
ouais.
Il va déterminer l'intention et déterminer le degré d'urgence. Et notre chargé de clientèle, parce que nous on met la technologie au service de l'humain, la technologie c'est un choix social, notre chargé de clientèle va dire bon, je peux traiter vite, je peux traiter bien cette intention. De la même façon, on a développé un assistant virtuel dans l'assurance, assurance auto, assurance habitation, sur l'épargne, et ça permet à nos chargés de clientèle de trouver tout de suite la réponse. En fait, c'est quoi le problème du big data? C'est de transformer le big data en information pertinente. Et ce qu'on fait avec Watson, c'est ça, c'est d'exploiter toute notre base documentaire et de la mettre au profit de chaque chargé de clientèle, comme un stagiaire présent auprès de chacun de nos chargés de clientèle qui veulent l'aider à bien répondre aux clients. Et par rapport à des craintes, finalement, vous avez les lois de la robotique d'Asimov. On dit le robot ne doit obéir, etc. Nous, on a vraiment dit le logiciel doit aider nos chargés de clientèle, il doit s'adapter aux besoins et il va faire son apprentissage avec les chargés de clientèle et avec les conseillers. Et donc finalement, nos clients, ils auront toujours en face d'eux un être de chair et de sang, mais qui sera aidé, exactement comme l'informatisation il y a quelques années.
one of the key benefits for Credit Mutual, they have several, as you appreciate. You know, when you implement a lot of these AI programs, you obviously want to test out the concepts and build things and see how they can be applied. But my experience is it's always really critical to start with what's the business problem. One of their key measurements was to free up person days. And with these different implementations you just heard about, they've freed up over 200,000 person days and reallocated that to education, training, and some sales and go-to-market efforts. So very, very early still, but tremendous benefits they've gained to date. So again, I've been part of this Watson unit and our AI initiative since 2014, and during those almost 5 years now, I've been to over 25 countries, and I've met with hundreds of businesses as well as government organizations. And it's just been incredible. And it's just the learnings as you go from country to country or business to business. There are lots of ideas and lots of things to think about. But one of the things that's crystallized for me over the last 4+ years is that we're no longer into this art of possible. I think a lot of that has been out there, and there's no doubt there's more to do. But this is really the period of art of doable. There's so much of this technology. Recently, I was in Asia, and I was meeting with a journalist, and they said, but Jay, when is AI going to happen? And my point is, that's the different question. It's not whether it's happening, it's permeating every aspect of society today in a very good way. We're seeing it whether we're at work, we're at home. There's so much that's being done today, so it's really not a matter of is it going to happen. It's happening. I think the fundamental question is, from the way I look at it, there's 3 lenses. First is the geography. Some countries or regions are moving more quicker than others, and there's a societal adoption and embracement of technology, and some might not be as advanced in some of their thinking. The second is just around the industry. Some industries, like financial services, already are very digital in a lot of respects, and they can take advantage of a lot of these benefits. Maybe other industries aren't moving as quickly in that area or as well prepared. And then lastly, businesses. Let's face it, we're all out there helping companies and run companies, and in the end, it gets back to, do you want to be a first mover, or do you want to be a fast follower? And my experience is, whether you're that developer, you're in a small startup, or a bigger company, it all comes back to customers. And the customers have been spoiled a bit in that there's all this great technology on the consumer front, and I think a lot of people are waking up, going to work, saying, well, I want that same experience. So my personal view is, from a company perspective, you either do it and tell your narrative, or it's going to be done to you from a competitor perspective. But even more important than that is you've got customers, and customers are going to have high expectations on how you best service them, and that's what this is really all about. Data. You've heard a lot about it throughout the day. I smile because, you know, for the last several years, whether you were doing ERP, think SAP and others, you've always talked about data. But there's 2 key points I wanted to talk about. One was what I call the data supply chain. It's, you know, where does the data come from? Where do you get it? How do you extract the right information? You know, the sources, the formats. There's so much data. They say it's doubling every 2 or 3 years. And then you flow it all the way through to curation of data with AI, getting the data ready for AI to be used. There's a lot of cleansing. There's a lot of annotation. And then you follow it all the way through to trust, transparency. And ultimately, some companies are hyper-focused on the monetization of data. So there's that whole data supply chain. And then the second aspect is the accessibility of data. There's a lot of theories. There's a lot of discussions about it. I've seen it firsthand over the last 4.5 years in the hundreds of implementations I've been a part of and have reviewed, and that is that with the data, again, it's not just the sheer volume, it's how do you access it, right? They say that as much as 88% of the data is invisible, or referred to as dark data. That means humanity has encoded it in language and unstructured information. Think text, blogs, tweets, pictures, videos. And you can't access it without machine learning and some of these other AI technologies. And that's the key, is how do you access that information and use those insights to drive your business, or for social reasons, help you with some of these initiatives to help improve society. So there's a lot of opportunity, but that's the fundamental point here, is to mimic some of the human thought process so you can access that data that to date is not accessible via programmable languages. AI, a lot of great discussion about what is it. At IBM, we view it as augmented intelligence. We do a lot of research, including unsupervised learning and across the whole spectrum. But fundamentally, it just gets back to, it's really the way we view it as, it's a partnership. It's a new partnership between man and machine, where we're enhancing, accelerating, and scaling human expertise. That's what these are, big knowledge systems of expertise. And that's very, very important. If you look at some of the uses of AI, some will say, well, these projects take too long, they're hard to train, and we should go much faster. Agreed. And over the last 4 years, a lot of great companies have a lot of great technology, and I won't speak for them, but there's been a lot of advancement, no doubt. You look at language, think, vision. You look at all the translations of things like empathy, voice. Think speech to text, text to speech. There's so much that's already been accomplished. But in the end, there's still an expectation, I think a misperception, that out of the box, these systems should be at a certain level of intelligence and efficacy. And my point is, these are learning systems. These are systems like a person. When you learn a new body of knowledge, say you're an X-ray technician learning how to read X-rays, it's going to take time and learn. And no doubt, there's a lot of great tools out in the marketplace to help you go faster, whether it be the data, supply chain, or these other areas. But again, I wouldn't lose sight of these are learning systems that are going to become experts in fields, and that training will inevitably go faster and faster, and there's a lot more to do. On the complex reasoning, just quickly, again, a lot of discussion about complex reasoning. To me, this is one of the trickier parts of what you see here. This isn't everything, it's just some of the key pieces. And the point is, you run a lot of these algorithm models, and you weight the models, and then you try to come up with the best possible outcome. But with systems like Watson, we've been training it to think like a profession, to think like that insurance agent, like that engineer, like that oncologist. And that takes time, and it's a continuous process where you have those experts teaching it the system. But now to pick up those complex reasoning algorithms and other information and just say, now what I just taught an oncologist, I can pick that whole thing up and now go teach another profession. There's a lot of things that are leverageable, but from a reasoning, there's much more to be done from a complex reasoning perspective to lift it up from one profession to another profession. But we've already proven, as of others, there's great synergies already today. Back to my point about the art of the doable. It's here today, and there's more to learn as we think about this. But in the end, the magic is all about knowledge, right? All that great insight, all these things you see on the screen, that's all feeding into knowledge, because that's going to be the power. I always like to use the analogy in business when you're talking professions to a company. How important is it to have the top 1%? If you look at your workforce in a certain domain, that 1%, top 1% of the performance employees, the best of the best, how important it is to scale that across your whole organization, across that domain, across that business process. That's really where the power and excitement comes in. So we've already have a lot of great proof points, and there's much more to come. Wanted to run through two quick examples. The first is Autodesk, and back to my earlier point, it always starts with what's the business problem you're trying to solve. With Autodesk, they were shifting from basically an on-premise type of software, in-a-seat software, to a SaaS model. They receive over 1 million calls in their call centers from partners as well as customers. And they also were expanding with this new SaaS model, so they had much more of that 24/7 need for servicing. And they also had, on average, over 1.5 days of resolution time on some of the inquiries that came into the center. So they created a virtual agent called Ava. It's been scaling with their business, and two of the big measurements that we measured the progress on, one was customer satisfaction. It improved 10 points, and it also improved their response time for those resolution issues by 99%. It went from 1.5 or longer days down to, in some cases, minutes. So there's lots more to do, but lots of success to date. The next is Woodside. Woodside, for those of you not familiar, one of the largest energy companies in Australia, and we had a different starting point with them. As you can appreciate, in that type of industry, these capital projects can run for 10, 20, 30 years. They cost, in some cases, billions of dollars. Their problem was knowledge management. their CEO asked us, what can I do at the end of the day to better harvest and grow this experience? Back to my point about the top 1% of in his case, engineers. So we ingested over 122 million pages of documentation, technical publications, interviews with some of their top engineers, and basically took all this information in an MVP type of format in 3 months and rolled this out to all their engineers. So an engineer can pick up their device and basically ask it any series of questions, both frequently asked questions, as well as we're continuing to build out some of the more long-tail types of questions. So great success, and for them, one of their key metrics was improving safety, and through this solution, we've been able to reduce the safety incidents by 25%. Shifting gears, I know there's a lot of companies out here, a lot of developers, and as important as business is, we've been very passionate about the goodwill and the social aspects and how this technology can be applied. So a couple quick examples. One is a project that started out of our IBM R&D center, and it's called Healer. And in that case, as you know, there's this explosion of social networks. What we're trying to do is find a way to better reach hard-to-reach communities. So an example, homeless children. How do you better access them? Well, why? Because we're trying to better create awareness and education, a topic like HIV. So we worked with data scientists, we worked in our labs and with some other partners, and we basically built this pilot to be able to figure out, using algorithms, AI, and others, to how we can best reach this population. So that's just one of many. Behind me, you see many, many others from all sorts of companies creating this. It's not one company. The point being is the social good is just so very important. The other one is the Australian Crisis Tracker, and that was emanated out of some thoughts of the government because they were having issues with the response times after natural disasters or emergencies. So they wanted a way, using downloads from Twitter, some streaming from Twitter, to better analyze the data, applying AI and algorithms to basically better respond to these incidents. And the Red Cross in Australia actually applied this in a pilot for the brush fires back in 2013 and 14, and more to do. But those are just two examples, and I'm sure I can share with all of you the importance of, as important as business is, there's that social aspect of making sure we can leverage this to tackle some of the largest challenges in society. And with that, I wanted to close on a couple points. The first is, as I look at where we are, where we've been, and where we need to go, I would simply summarize it as three things. The first is, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, we've seen Moore's Law, Metcalfe's Law, and we think this next impact, this exponential impact, is going to be as impactful as anything we've seen. And so my point is, we're just getting started, and I think this AI is going to be a significant part for many years to come. And it's not a question of whether or not it's going to happen, it's here. And I think this point about the exponential learning and this impact in helping businesses to better improve the way they compete and, again, to help society is going to be a great initiative. The second point, I look at AI as being as transformational as the internet was 20 years ago. And I highly recommend all the companies out there, developers working with the companies, you need to have an AI strategy. I know some will view that as technology, some will say, yeah, it's business. It's a company's strategy. And if you look at all this technology, and I talked earlier about data, we won't have time to go into the finer points, but the data supply chain, trust, transparency, the ethics, there's just so much about AI, and that needs to be front and center in a strategy. The data, the knowledge. Knowledge is important. All this work that you're going to do is going to basically create this knowledge. And then lastly, you're going to reimagine business process. And in the end, you take the data and automation and reimagining business processes, that's IP. And it's another reason to have your AI strategies, because you also need to rationalize, like data, that's your IP. Do you want your data going out into the open, or do you want to try to rationalize and make sure you can draw a competitive advantage from that data? And then lastly, we all have a role. And you've heard that throughout the day. I'm sure you'll hear it tomorrow. It's going to take all of us coming together, whether it be ensuring this next generation has the adequate training and skills. Our view is there's still a big skill shortage in these areas, and we're going to need to all work together, all companies, even our competitors, to come together to make sure we're doing the responsible thing with society in equipping that next generation of a workforce. The second is creating AI ethical, what I call guideposts. There's a lot of ethics in these discussions, and you've seen a lot of surveys. We want to make sure that we, together, are ensuring that this technology is being applied the right way, not just in business, but in society. And then the third and final is trust and transparency. Where does the data come from? How do you train the algorithms? What is the output? Do I have visibility? Can I audit that? As you heard probably recently, we at IBM, we just announced a new SaaS-based platform where we're basically trying to break the code of this black box of AI and create that trust and transparency and expanding it and using other machine learning and other AI frameworks so everyone can use this type of technology in an open source type format, because it's that important to make sure that we create that trust and transparency. So with that, I wanted to just close my presentation with a quote from Thomas Watson Jr. He was the son of the IBM founder. This was taken in the early 1960s. And I like it because I think the words you see in that screen are as true today as they were back then about this AI and man and machine, and it's not man versus machine. So I just look at this period of AI as being the next stop in the journey as we move forward. And again, I think it's upon all of us to make sure that we're paving the way for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. It's great to see you. I'm going to open up the questions to the floor, if that's okay.
All right, great.
If you just bear with us for a few more minutes. If you'd like to ask Jay a question, please raise your hand so we can see you here. Gentleman just there at the front. Any other? Put your hand up now. We'll just get a microphone to you just there. Thank you. If you wouldn't mind standing for me, so you can just say your name and where you're from. Thank you.
My name is Ivo. I come from Amsterdam, work for Go Data Driven. Thank you for your talk. At the one hand, you say that we have to improve society by using data. We have to use open source technology to do so. At the same time, you suggest that companies should use the competitive advantage of their data and keep it for themselves. So that's a contradiction, right? How do you explain that?
So did you say, sorry, forgive me, did you say outsourcing data and keeping it for yourselves? So what the contradiction is there?
Yeah, so he suggests that you should use your own data.
Use your own
as a competitive advantage.
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
That's a great question. So here's my view on that. 20% of the world's data is searchable via the web. 80% is not. It's owned by business and governments. In the end, where the power really comes is combining the 20% with the 80%. So my point on the data is data can be a competitive advantage. There's some solutions out there that take your data and you don't really even know your data is being used. My point is in the companies we've consulted with and have driven these projects, we view that data, that 80%, as their IP, their data. So we factor that into how we use it, how we train the algorithms, and how we build out a solution. I'm not saying we're the only ones that do that, but that is the point of view on why data is so important, because I think there's a lot of competitive advantage in the data, and you just need to think twice about, is it my data that I want to create in a general AI data set out in the open?
I hope that answers your question. Jay, we'll have to leave it there, but thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate your time. Jay, everybody, Jay Bellissimo.
Thank you.